This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a book this week.
I watched a movie this week. We're doing Ad Astra.
And Heart of Darkness.
Let's get into it. Hearts of Darkness. Ad Astra. What in the world?
You saw the movie?
I saw the movie.
It's getting a lot of, I see it on the buses and the billboards and everything.
Good reviews.
Yeah.
Critics seem to like it. I don't know what the audiences really are saying much about it. They kind of seem lukewarm.
It's got
We'll
Bradley
see.
Pitts in it as an astronaut. If you've seen a picture of him in an astronaut costume, then that's this
Staring
movie.
blissfully off into the infinite abyss.
Yeah. We looked it up, and it's based on Heart of Darkness.
Who knew?
Which a lot of things are. And you might have heard of that. You might have read it in high school. You might have heard of Apocalypse Now, which is the more known thing that took from Heart of Darkness. Evan was asking me before we started recording what in the world Ad Astra means. So, of course,
I've seen the movie. That's not the whole thing. Generally, I liked it. But I have no idea what in the world the title means. So please, enlighten me.
It is a Latin phrase, and it means to the stars. And the origins, the first time it was ever used was by Virgil in the Aeneid, Book 9, line 641, to be specific.
Wow.
So it comes from...
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're following along.
Find that specific little passage. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just Latin, and it's to the stars, and it's used in a lot of Air Force Academy stuff or in
that
mottos.
Makes sense.
And,
There it is. That's,
But it's definitely a weird title.
Is
it ever used in the movie at all?
No, I don't believe so. And maybe I'm wrong, so,
well,
call me out if I'm wrong.
Heart of Darkness is used in the last line of the book, which I always
Classic.
love. Yeah.
Classic. I love it.
Yeah.
Give me a refresher of Heart of Darkness, because all I know is the general, the young man goes into the unknown in the pursuit of the elder who's really gone for it, whatever it may be. So that's really all I remember.
Mm-hmm. The book came out in 1899, long time ago.
Good Lord.
And it was a novella, and it was packaged with other shorter stories in a magazine, and then it got its own thing.
Are the other stories anything significant?
Yeah, the other two stories were received by critics and got the more commentary than Heart of Darkness did when it came out. Yeah. And Joseph Conrad, even himself, did not think that it was anything really to write home about. And so when those came out, it was like, oh, these two are pretty neat, and didn't even really get any mention. It was only until like the 1950s, after World War II, when we really started seeing anti-colonial, anti-taking over countries and subjugating people.
Stories?
What's that?
What were the two stories?
Just based on other aspects of his life. So we'll learn a little bit about him later on. But he basically wrote from all of his own life experiences.
So the three were all his.
Yeah.
Oh, I got
you.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was published with other authors' work or
No. Sorry. Yeah. So it was three of his stories, completely unrelated, based on various adventures that he had.
Interesting.
And the other two were more critically acclaimed in his lifetime. And basically all of his stuff did not get hardly any recognition in his lifetime.
Dang.
But Heart of Darkness, it's interesting because I don't know if they do anything with the narrative structure, and this is a little bit of what it's known for, is that it starts out with these dudes chilling on this boat in London on the River Thames. They're just shooting the breeze, and one guy is like going to regale them with a story of something that happened to him.
I gotcha.
So the main narrator is only like the first couple paragraphs. And it's this guy saying, and Marlowe, who is this other random dude chilling there on the boat waiting for the tide to come back in, is telling this story about how he went into the Belgian Congo and was looking for this guy, et cetera, et cetera. And then the entire book is in quotation marks, except for when it pops out to be like, and he smoked a pipe in the middle of the night and everybody was listening, and then he continued his story.
Right, okay.
But I think the reason that he frames it in that way is so that we are also intrigued as to what is the point of this. And this is... For the historical context, there was a lot of these stories of adventure on the high seas and adventure going into uncharted land, and the whole Dr. Livingstone, I presume, where Stanley came in. I don't know if you've heard that quote. It was this guy who was deep in the jungles of Africa, and there was a reporter who went to go find him, and they found him. And that whole mystery of the Dark Continent, that was all taking over colonial Europe at the time. And so it makes sense that he would tell this story and be like, and what is the point of this?
Yeah.
And so you are from the perspective, not of the person who actually experienced it, but from somebody listening to the story, because he does have a bigger point than it's just this wet, crazy adventure.
Yeah.
He's speaking to the heart of darkness, which is humanity and colonialism and so on. So Marlowe starts telling this story then, and now we're in it. And he gets this job to go down the river in the Congo. He hears of this guy, Kurtz, who I guess they use the same name in Apocalypse Now. Yeah. And he hears about this guy who's gone off the deep end and is revered like a god and, is doing crazy, illicit, illegal activities and murdering people. And it's this ivory trade is what they're after.
Okay.
So he's commandeering this boat. And as the boat is busted, so he has to wait at this one station, and then they're going down the river in a series of events. It's almost similar, I guess, in what we talked about with like Huck Finn, where that type of story can be adapted in so many different ways.
Definitely.
Like you said, in Ad Astra, it's being adapted to space travel and looking for a father figure. In this case, it's this guy who is in the trade of ivory. They get attacked by native people. He sees a bunch of different stuff happen. And then he finally meets with him, although Kurtz is very sickly, catches him trying to escape from this situation, but realizes that all of these native people are almost like under his cultish spell, it seems like. And they get him on the boat back, because that was his whole mission, was to go get this guy. Kurtz dies on the boat on the way back, and his famous last words are, the horror, which could mean for a lot of different things. But Marlowe, when he gets back...
That's in the book. Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. When he gets back to Europe, has to decide whether he's going to lie to these people, because everybody thinks that he's a hero, but he saw the descent into madness that this place and the greed of people overtakes. And so Kurtz's bride-to-be is asking what he said, and he was like, he said your name is the last words, and feels bad about lying about it. And then the story ends with him saying, and that was what happened. And one of the other guys is like, the tide is coming back in. And they look out over London into this darkness, into the heart of darkness, which was a big critique at the time, because it was like, the story is actually about how the guy listening to the story is looking at London and saying, that's the heart of darkness. It's not just going into uncharted Africa and getting out of civilized society, and that's what turns you into a madman and a cannibal and a psycho.
Right.
It's in Europe too.
Yeah,
it's the colonial people. It's us going in there, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
So that was not that didn't do very well with the modern readers of the time who were not expecting that.
They just got their cars. The mail just got delivered. No, what do you mean? This is no.
We're doing good. But I will say,
they're firefighters now.
We're getting better.
Come on, no.
Something that did not get better. It is very racist. But again, it's like, this was written in the 1890s. This is what he was experiencing at the time. He is making a critique on this is messing with people, and it's not just...
Absolutely. It's not.
But it is framing it from the perspective of, Africa is savages, and we're going in there...
But it's of the time. That's just it just was written at the time it was written. And that's what a product of that naturally. And we've covered that.
And so you could say, in this book, he's not treating the African continent like it's normal people. But he's not critiquing that. I mean, that's like
but is
years and years ahead.
That is something to be considering when covering it. When covering, when thinking about it.
It is a hard book to read now for that reason. But it is I think we're learning this as we're covering more books and more pieces of media. The cultural context does play a role. So it doesn't have any of I know with Ad Astra, it's a space event, and he is going looking for his father off in the far reaches of
in
space.
Ad Astra, he is Brad Pitt's character is the son of the most famous astronaut who started the Lima Project, who is going to make first contact, and they're going onto the edges of the Earth to make first contact. And he hasn't been seen in 30 years, and basically the entire project is presumed dead. So after, some exciting action sequence, we find out that perhaps his father is still alive. And so the government is using Brad Pitt's character to try to make contact with him and perhaps bring him back. And so then spurs a journey of this young man trying to understand what fatherhood is and what being a son is, and what the entire movie shifts into talking about, is the meaning of life to the pursuit, or is it the things you create in the wake of that pursuit? And people who can not see both ends of that stick, who cannot see that duality, who look in one direction and miss out.
The journey or the destination kind of thing. Yeah, so seems like it uses the same narrative structure, but not the same theme at all.
Yeah.
Because nobody's talking about colonization.
It uses the backdrop of space, but it's not really talking about pushing the frontiers of space. Ultimately, I think the message really comes away saying that this is cool. We can find some interesting stuff, but you might not find what you're looking for.
Right.
So don't be upset with what you find, and please appreciate the things that you have.
Yeah.
It really doesn't take a hard stance on, where humanity should be focusing its efforts, other than maybe we need to look inward, perhaps, which is a positive message. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Heart of Darkness had a very sort of pessimistic message, I would say.
Well, I'm really pleased with how they flipped that in this.
And this director, writer, James Gray, has done quite a bit in these more personal stories kind of thing. His last movie was called The Lost City of Z, which is more even similar to Heart of Darkness in that it's based on a true story. And it's his father-son duo looking for this famed lost city in Brazil in the early 1900s.
Interesting.
Yeah. But he knows, I read an interview with him, and he knows quite a bit about both film and literature, because people will make comparisons to 2001, the movie.
Yeah, of course.
With this. But of course, we know the subtitle of that is A Space Odyssey. And he was saying, the comparison is interesting because it's almost like this is the opposite of the Odyssey, which is about Odysseus coming back, or this father figure who's gone for 20 years. He's saying this is almost the story of Telemachus, who's the son who is back in Ithaca and trying to figure out where his father is. So it's just interesting that he knows a lot about literature and films and
smart dude,
and inspirations from. And I looked at most of his movies are based on a book or some sort of piece of literature. Although he does
find that more and more.
As we make this, it seems like everything is.
Oh man, his movies are great. Oh, they're based on a great novel.
And he was saying, as far as the tone and subtlety, because he said, I'm sure there'll be some people who see Ad Astra and say, where's the acting? Because he's like, I just felt like being honest and giving moments where you see the other side, because it is. And I imagine some of the criticism is like, oh, it's really boring. Or I saw some article, it's like it's boring. It's like,
well, he's
too
definitely
subtle.
He gives a restrained performance, but I think it really worked ultimately with what they were trying to say with the themes of masculinity and what is fatherhood, the roles that we play. So I think it's an absolutely deliberate choice. They're really trying to tap into something perhaps that it might be a little more truthful than cinematic.
Right.
And maybe that's why First Man didn't work.
right, because it was too cinematic.
But as far as like the hardcore truth of how some people process things and the people that it takes to be in these certain roles, that perhaps they are more restrained and analytical in thinking. And I think this film actually has the benefit of having a voiceover. I don't know that the voiceover is like particularly incredible, but I think it does help add, and I think it really does help relate this back to Heart of Darkness.
And it's very interesting because we had just, on our Goldfinch episode, which if you're listening and haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it.
Please go listen to it.
The previous episode, we were talking about how the book was written in the first person and there is no overhead narration, or you said it was weird in the movie. And like with this, obviously the book, Heart of Darkness, is written in the first person, or is written as this account of this guy, and he does lean in heavily into that narrative technique in the movie, which you don't see that much these days in the person's head.
it struck me as a bit different, this particular voiceover, because he's not really adding to what you're seeing. He's adding to what you should be thinking about. And you could kind of throw it in a bunch of different directions, which I did really appreciate it. It tapped into the meditativeness of it, and it benefited ultimately from the voiceover.
With the overhead narration and looking at who James Gray is and him coming up with this original story, but it's based on this. In an interview, which I'll link to, he was talking about how they ask him, like, well, what's your relationship with your father? Because
it seems like father.
Yeah, a lot of his stuff is about that. Or that's what we're finding more and more, is the thing that people write about is based on their own life experience and that kind of thing. And he was like, yeah, I have a great relationship with my father. I just know that when you have those...
right here. Hi, how's it going?
I'm James Gray Sr.
No, never had a tense moment. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son.
That's why he's always around me. Yeah. The things that he was saying is that is a very common archetype that people know and understand. Like if you say, oh, they're friends, you have to go into the nuance of, well, how long were they friends? How did they meet? When did they break apart? There's a million different things. But if you say, oh, it's a father and son, people automatically know what that means.
And that's way that gives you way more than going, well, he's an officer in the military, go hunt down the colonel. It's like that gives you some context, some like trajectory there that certainly is interesting, but it certainly is not as deep and intricate as a father-son relationship.
Right.
And you haven't seen him in 30 years. Maybe he's out there. Go.
You're right. Yeah. So after reading more about James Gray talking about his own personal life and how that is not quite, although there are certainly some elements that factor into what he's making, I was interested in Joseph Conrad, because I'm sure, dear listener, person listener, you know absolutely nothing about this dude who wrote Heart of Darkness, which is a controversial book, which has a bunch of stuff made after it and is in high schools everywhere. Everywhere. I'll throw some interesting tidbits at you.
Ooh, those tasty nibs.
He was born Joseph Theodor Conrad Korzeniowski in 1857 in Poland, or what is now Poland. He's a native Polish speaker. French is his second language. English is his third language.
Wow.
He didn't even know English until age 21.
Wow.
And he's revered as one of the best British authors.
Incredible.
Is crazy, yeah.
This is incredible.
As far as his life, got started out, like I said, 1857, and his parents wanted to liberate Poland from Russia.
His parents wanted to liberate Poland?
Yeah, they were very, very politically active.
Sorry, I took that too literally. His parents?
Liberated. Well, they tried.
Oh my God.
Well, we're going to get into some sad stuff now.
Oh,
unfortunately. So his father was arrested before he could even do anything, was exiled to northern Russia. You know how they do. They're just like, you're going up there. When Joseph was 4 years old. So then he stayed with his mother. His mother, though, died in 1865, and then his father died in 1869. Oh my God. His mom died when he was 7. His dad died when he was 11 after being exiled. So now he's having to go live with his uncle, and he's like, I got to get out of here. This place is awful. I don't want to be a part of this. So he joins the French Merchant Marines, which is where he learns French, and that becomes his second language. At the age of 17, he's doing this.
This is incredible.
Yeah. So then he lives the crazy life. Now he's on boats.
Quit making the book. Sorry.
Well, he hasn't even made anything yet. So
no, I'm just that was just me projected to the artists of the world. Go ahead, making Hearts of Darkness over again, and let's tell this guy's actual story, because it's actually fascinating.
Yeah. So then he goes out to the West Indies. He goes to South America. He smuggled guns for Spanish rebels
at 17, because that's tight.
The ship got wrecked off of the coast. So then he fled back into France.
Telling me he was a gun smuggling pirate?
Yes.
This is incredible.
Before 20 years old, yeah. So then some of this stuff is in, if you're interested in this, his novel Nostromo and Arrow of Gold, which are obviously written later in his life, but those are about these experiences.
This is amazing.
In his teens, yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't know who this dude was, I bet you want to now.
He fought in a duel over this woman with an American named Captain Blunt, and went back to his uncle and said...
He fought with a woman? Wait,
over a woman.
He fought over a woman.
Over the Spanish woman, yeah. But got shot.
Oh my God.
And so he lost all his money. So he goes back to his uncle and is like, oh, I was gambling and I tried to kill myself because I lost everything.
Well, we've all been there.
And doesn't admit that he's been living this rabble-rousing life. And then he turns 20 years old.
Story.
Yeah.
And then he turns 20.
And then he turns 20 years old.
Oh, 20.
And so
fantastic.
What a great year.
Here we go. Strap up those boots, young man. Welcome to your 20s. Sure.
So instead of trying to work for the French, he decides to become British. And some postulate because, again, he's trying to get further from Russia because he's supposed to be there and they can draft him for all their nonsense or exile him or do whatever.
Good Lord.
And he can also be promoted quicker. So now, like I said, he's 21. This is when he's starting to learn English. He served on British ships for 12 years, went to Singapore. He sank a boat off the coast of Java, which is what the short story Youth is based on.
Why did he sink the boat?
I don't know. Maybe it was just bad. It burned and then sank. Just these boats are terrible in the late 1800s.
My God.
In 1888, there's a story based on that time when he's being a captain, and that's called The Secret Sharer. So all of these, like I said, are written way after his time.
Got to do some living first.
Got to do some
but he got it in.
He got it in.
20 years old, already had enough.
So then after commanding the ship, remember he's working for the British, he takes one stint piloting a boat for the Belgians on the Belgian Congo, and then this is what becomes Heart of Darkness, is based on his experience there, going to Africa and piloting that boat.
Oh.
And then, so he started writing in 1880.
Kill his superior in cold blood in the Congo.
No, though some theorize there's questioning about who this crazy ivory general, wacky doodle guy is actually based on.
Yeah.
And there's a couple people that they're like, oh, maybe it's an amalgamation of this person, or this is a famous guy who was in there at the time that was off the rails.
Or somebody he murdered that we have no idea about because he was a gun smuggling pirate before the age of he could drink legally. He
was living it up. And then it's surprising that he decides
this guy killed people.
We're not saying
I'm not saying that.
Maybe he did.
I said it.
It's also possible, depending on how large our listenership gets. I was thinking about this the other day as a total side note, that like once we hit a certain number of thousand people listening, that like somebody listening has murdered someone. You know? Because like what is the percentage of like one in whatever people has murdered someone? I've been thinking about
that recently. I've been like, man, I've definitely been in rooms with serial killers, or at least somebody who's taken a life or maybe more. I don't know.
Accidentally
at some point
life.
In my life, for sure. Anyway, moving on.
So now, Joseph Conrad hasn't allegedly murdered anyone. He starts writing at the age of 32 in 89, but he's still doing his boat business until 1898. So for about another 10 years, he's still boating, but he's also writing. So yeah, it was after 20 years and 16 books. In his lifetime, there was a book called Chance, which came out in 1913, and that became a hit. Oh. But all these other things that I've mentioned that are all based on these other things in his life didn't really do anything at all, including Heart of Darkness.
Sure.
And like I said,
it's a hard one. I mean, hey, it wasn't always easy.
And because he's saying interesting things that are not popular for the time.
Yeah, they take some digesting in the popular conscious.
Yeah. They're not
in the
like Ad Astra, maybe,
just
you know?
I see.
Yeah. This is a critique on us. I don't like this.
Oh.
Yeah.
My stomach hurts.
And then it said that he was sick often from the Belgian Congo thing.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of stomach hurting, yeah, he had constant health problems. So he died at 66.
Oh, a full life, though.
A full life, yeah. Used his name, Joseph Conrad, because his other name got misspelled too much. But yeah, we don't realize also that like this writing did not come easy to him because he did not speak English before 22 and did not write in English until 32. And so we can see then how I'm sure if you actually went through that experience and saw what was going on up the Congo River and people just being put in chains and said that they were criminals, but they're actually just enslaving them and torturing them, you'd be pretty skeptical of the society that you live in, and then you go back to and want to write about everything that you've seen.
Yeah.
Which is almost like what I guess the space travel kind of fits into, is like, we don't know what that's going to be like, but I'm sure that experience is going to be vastly different. And I think there's even like James Gray was saying like, oh yeah, there would be pirates on the moon, or there would still be crime, or we wouldn't solve the problems of Earth just because we moved planets.
It was interesting to see he postulates that the moon becomes a type of tourist trap, which I thought was particularly interesting, and that the dark side of the moon like is coincidentally like the uninhabited part of the moon, uncoincidentally, and that it's undeclared ground. So whatever happens out there happens. So it was interesting to see. Oh yeah, if you play that kind of logic out, what would be up there? Interesting. Yeah, it could go wrong real quick. Yeah. That was a really interesting thing to see. Like we can go to the edges of the universe. We can throw ourselves in places we were never meant to be, and not solve one thing.
Yeah.
We don't even know. It's like that ultimately the movie is about like that endless pursuit.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting.
Do the ends justify the means?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting at the end of Heart of Darkness how he chooses to lie to the wife to be and be like, no, Kurtz was this, and how everybody reveres him and believes him, and this is the only guy that has the story. And a lot of people are saying that, yeah, like that's how Joseph Conrad felt, and that's why he couldn't write about it for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And even still, he's writing it as a multi-layered story of somebody else who's telling a story to somebody else, which you might not even be true. And in that story, that person can't tell the truth.
That's interesting because I don't, and perhaps I'm wrong on this, but they don't. So in Ad Astra, they say that the Tommy Lee Jones character is one of the most famous. He's a hero.
Yeah,
died on, and him and the whole crew died out there, doing the country's work. When secretly classified, and we find out through the plot of the film, it's possible that he probably killed his entire crew, and it probably went mad and is some actual monster, really.
Yeah,
and so you start to grow kind of this paranoia about what is the truth here, what did happen, and what does the government know, and what narrative are they spinning?
Yeah,
they throw this paranoia narrative in there, but they never really come back and circle around how, when we find out the truth about what happened in the Lima Project with Tommy Lee Jones's character and what he really did. They never really address how or if that ever gets reconciled in the public view at all. Yeah. Because as far as the public is concerned, he's a hero. He's always been a hero. It really is restrained on what it's saying about all these things as to really the implications on Brad Pitt's character, I think, solely, but relating to how we all address our own situations. A very, very introspective
I feel like this is
really just about the self.
It's definitely reflective of Joseph Conrad's take on all this stuff, where it is hard. I mean, he's also writing in English, which is his third language, but it's also hard for him to literally speak on this kind of thing and critique it at a time when it was not something that people wanted to hear about. And you can sense an anxiety and a question of like, if we are lying about this stuff when we come back, what is that saying about ourselves? And even after this guy has told this story in the story, everybody else that's listening to the story is like, well, the tides come in. Like, did you not just hear what he said? Are we still looking at this Heart of Darkness within the community? But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me that they've now turned this into a more father-son story about do the ends justify the means? And so I was looking into what else is Heart of Darkness, what other legacy is left.
Yes, I'm interested in this. What else?
So there was an opera that came out in 2011.
An opera?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Something that I found was interesting was 2 video games are based on this. So for those that love video games, Far Cry 2, which came out in 2008, you're this mercenary who's in Africa and going after this arms dealer called the Jackal and trying to hunt them down. So it's pretty much the same thing, but set in more modern times.
No, it's a great device for a video game, actually. I really
and then there's one that came out called Spec Ops: The Line in 2012, and that's modernized again, but it's set in Dubai during these sandstorms. During some sort of Middle Eastern conflict, and you are trying to find this commander who's gone rogue. And the commander's name, which they did on purpose, is John Conrad.
tie.
Alluding to Joseph Conrad.
Ooh.
That's the general or commander that you're going after in this video game.
They know.
So they know their literary devices.
And then Taylor, I have one more thing.
Wow.
Because I bet our listeners don't know that there is simultaneously another film in theaters right now that is also based on Heart of Darkness.
Now is the time.
It's called Monos. It is in a limited release right now, and it's being called something between Heart of Darkness and Lord of the Flies, which we also covered a few months ago.
So go listen to that.
We were looking at something that said it was Apocalypse Now on Shrooms.
It's a foreign film?
Yeah, it's directed by Alejandro Landis. But he has a couple things, but I think this is his first major work.
Well, I'll put a link to the trailer.
Yeah, I haven't seen this film, but what I have heard of it and what we've said here is certainly colorful. And so if this story, Heart of Darkness...
But you're not into
all these
space.
Things,
yeah, you don't want to go see Ad Astra, go see Monos.
Yeah, it's out right now. You might be able to catch it at a theater next to you.
Good looks. Evan knows the movies. I know the books.
Who knew? 2 movies, same book. 1 episode. What do you got? Come on. This is what you come for. Taylor.
We learned so much today.
I had a blast. Ad Astra.
Heart of Darkness.
This was great.
Reach out to us.
Yeah, reach out to us. If you're into something, if you're into a show, if you're into a book, if you know a movie's coming out, basically, just talk to us. What are you into? What are you watching?
We'll do the deep dive.
We love hearing, seeing what people are up to. We're always planning episodes, so who knows?
At illiterate pod is how you do that. At illiterate pod on Instagram. Give us a message. Let us know what you want to see or hear, and we will catch you all next week.
Cool. See you guys.